Hey, well, welcome back to another episode of the Profit Minded Business Podcast. Today we're joined by three great guests. Really, two of them are our co-hosts, which you have gotten very familiar with, who always add a ton of information for us. But today our guest of honor is Glenn Wasser. He runs a company called Every Call Counts, which focuses on improving the call center quality for companies that are receiving phone calls from customers and really trying to make sure that first impression or that continuing customer service is on point. And we just had some awesome conversation a little bit about how some of the impact he's had doing what he's doing, and it's very exciting. So glad everyone's here. Jacob Andrews here with us from iView Media and Drone's iView. You know, he is the one that helps us produce his podcast. Thank you for joining us, Jacob. And of course, Lynn Spencer from Killingsworth Spencer CPA. She is also one of our all-stars when it comes to our tax planning. And of course, your host, Corbin Cook with S&B Strategy Consultants and Auxilium Associates. So, Glenn, tell us a little bit about your history and how you arrived at being able to advise companies the way you are now.
Okay. The quick version is I'm actually an Atlanta native. I'm a fourth generation Atlanta native, which is kind of unusual. I went to high school at Riverwood, not too far from here. I grew up very close to here and have lived in Atlanta till I was about 18, went away to college, then went away to graduate school, then got my first job and was living in California working for the Nestle company, then lived in Vevey, Switzerland for a couple of years. Came back and had another couple of, all my early jobs were with packaged goods, including working for the Coca-Cola company, working for Canada Dry Beverage Company, Nestle's, it was actually the Lean Cuisine Group, a company called Tofuti, which was a non-dairy frozen dessert, which I hope is not sold anymore. And I hope they're not listening. And then I went to work for Comcast in 1996 on, just as a kind of a lark. I met the COO on an airplane, and I had previously been working, actually right before that, for the Suntory Water Group. And the Suntory Water Group is a company that owns Crystal Springs, Belmont Springs, owns lots of bottled water companies. And when I was sitting with the head of Comcast, I explained to him, and he bought into it, that selling bottled water was very similar to selling cable TV. These were both products you could buy that were available for free, and that both companies were selling at a profit. And that in both cases, the biggest expense, or the largest expense we both had, was in delivery. In bottled water, clearly sourcing the water and then carrying it on a truck. And in cable, having to buy products like ESPN, marking them up, and then reselling them to consumers. And again, the biggest similarity was for both companies, the biggest challenge was acquiring new customers at the lowest possible cost and maintaining those customer relationships for as long as possible. Apparently, I said the right thing to him, because he said, well, if you want to come join us, come on, you can join us. The company was very small. And he said, is a special privilege, we're going to let you go live in Meridian, Mississippi. And I realized I'd been hoodwinked, but I did not move to Meridian, but had an office there for the first 2 years and would commute back and forth, and really got to understand cable. We were also in the satellite business, and I'm going to date myself here, but we actually owned Primestar Satellite Partners. And if anybody remembers, before Dish or EchoStar, Primestar were the big dishes that looked like the top of a garbage can. They were 3 meters. And in 1998 or 1999, Primestar was trying to become more competitive and launched a new satellite, or at least attempted to launch a new satellite, so they could use a smaller dish. And it was a little bit ironic, or a little bit dramatic, because they had one chance to launch this rocket. They had enough money to get this satellite in orbit. If it got in orbit and started to transmit, then they could be competitive across the U.S. The rocket blew up on the launch pad. So that sort of spelled the end for it. And we had all gone to Cape Canaveral to see this thing, and it was supposed to be a big celebration.
Oh, you're
and
kidding.
The irony of it was, in the course of about 60 seconds, it went from a big celebration to everybody's looking for a job. So it was tough. But the company...
That's such a strange experience.
It was. It was a little bit surreal. But the company's, Comcast obviously survived and has done very, very well. And for the last 22 years, I've been involved with Comcast in increasing roles. I started as a VP and finished as a senior VP and this chief marketing officer for the company.
That's great.
And retired in 2016.
Okay. All right. So, and were you working in the call center at that point? You were doing chief marketing, so that's very different.
Well, under marketing, we had any way that we were going to acquire a customer fell into marketing. So it was not only the advertising, the promotion, the creative, the products, the positioning, the new channels, the new networks we would add. But what really happened is if you talk to cable customers, and again, not a surprise, most customers define their experience as either the person they talk to on the phone or the individual who comes in their house to install their cable. The rest of it is just corporate infrastructure. So it was very important from my perspective to make sure that experience really was conducive or helped make a sale or strengthen the sale. So I had to kind of fight long and hard to bring that into a marketing role versus a customer service role. And after a lot of pretty healthy debates, we got it brought into our group, and it was, I think in hindsight, probably one of the best things the company did.
You know, an overview conversation, I would have been like, yeah, that's totally, I get it, marketing. But now I'm like, oh, yeah, hell yeah, that's marketing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, there is nothing more infuriating than when I call AT&T Uverse and I enter in all my information on the auto thing, and when I get on the phone finally with somebody, they ask for my phone number again. I literally want to punch them. And they do it every single time. And then they ask me, is this a good number for us to call you on if we have promotional stuff to give you or whatever? I mean,
please call me at dinner.
I mean, I'm like, what are you doing? So by the time I get to my complaint or my issue or why my internet's down, I am so in the red that literally at that point I am calling Comcast on the other phone. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
you are not alone. Two things. One,
and it goes back and forth. If
absolutely.
You're Comcast, you're calling AT&T. Like, so it's not, you were correct in that the biggest piece of investment for them should be in that moment.
It gets even worse. When the phone rings, they know exactly who you are, because every modern call center has what's called ADC, automatic call detection, ACD. And as soon as it shows up in the office, it comes up with your phone number. And it also will bring up for the agent a screen that shows your entire history. Now, the only thing that needs to be done is to verify that it's you, because for social engineering, you don't want to give out account information for somebody who's not you. But if you ask for the last four of someone's social security number, that should be it. And then you move on. To your point, what's very interesting is I finished a project very recently about exactly what you were talking about, the cost of aggravating customers. And I don't want to sound xenophobic or anything like that, but if you have a call center experience where you talk to someone that doesn't speak English at a level you expect them to, you immediately become more frustrated. And it's unfortunately human nature. And that if the person repeats things that are in a way that are stilted or don't flow with the way you're expecting conversation, you immediately know you're talking to a call center in a different part of the world. And you know that in a lot of times the situation is not going to be resolved because in a lot of cases they've been trained to simply repeat back what that you've said to them and then say, well, is the problem solved? Well, no, nothing happened. The effect of that is when you said you see red, in a retention setting, if you're calling because you're mad and thinking about quitting, and then you experience this kind of aggravation, we plotted out the additional expense that the customer will place in terms of a fine. That if it normally would have taken a $20 credit to keep that customer, the customer is so aggravated by the end of that experience that it will go up anywhere between 15 and 20% just because the customer wants to get their piece of flesh out of the company for putting them through that hassle.
Yeah, they'll offer me some silly credit, and that insults me.
Absolutely.
And now I'm really mad.
Right.
And now it's like I'm willing to take the early termination penalty just to
get rid of you guys.
Just to say you messed up.
Or I'm going to make you pay to keep me around to teach you a lesson.
Yeah. You know what holds me there? my dang wireless cable boxes.
You and everybody else.
I'm like, oh, you mean I have to wire everything? Oh, I can't leave
Well,
you.
that and your email address. I mean, if you happen to have a domain,
No, that's a long
if you're on
time ago.
Gmail, you're fine.
Oh man, who's
Yeah.
when I get somebody that tells me they're on billstuff.net, I'm like,
I hate to tell you, but one of my domains is Mindspring.
oh yeah, my dad still has a Mindspring account.
Yeah,
So how do you combat that then? So all that frustration that stems from really the lack of customer care, the lack of customer service, like is that something that you have to worry about when you're hiring the personnel that's going to be working on the phone? Is it training that they have to go through? Like what did you find?
Yes, and yes. It starts with, for instance, we developed a pretty good profile of what a good, let's say we're talking about retention. And retention is what anytime you call up and say, I'm going to fire you, you being Comcast, or the customer. And those retention agents are different than the people you call when you say, my modem or my cable doesn't work.
Right.
The retention agents have as their role, their goal in life is to keep you from firing us. And it starts with how we hire those people. And we did a lot of research to see what kind of backgrounds our best retention agents had. And I went into it thinking that if you were a good customer service agent, you'd be a great retention agent. Had nothing to do with it. It turned out couldn't have been more wrong. Customer service agents are there to handhold and to try to fix things. Retention agents are salespeople. They're trying to convince you to do something that it's probably the toughest job in the business, because they're trying to convince you not to shoot us or throw us off the cliff.
Right.
And they've got to convince you by offering you something or talking you off the ledge or reminding you of what a great value it is to not leave. So just the way we hired those people, and it turned out, to your question, we had the best result with people who came out of the healthcare industry, who had been taking calls for insurers. And I guess because those folks had put up with every possible thing in the world, and nothing
A
threw
cable
them.
customer must have been easy
A
for him.
walk in the park. So we went and we started trying to hire as many people who had healthcare experience, and they really, really did well. Then the other thing that worked really well for us is we developed a compensation program where we paid people based on the amount of dollars they maintained from each of the customers they talked to and the number of units they maintained. And a unit is simply whether a customer maintained video, whether they can maintain their phone service, whether they maintained high-speed internet. And if they maintained all three, they would be a triple play customer that was maintained. So the way we paid people was a grid that would increase depending on the more money and the more products you saved. And the better you did, the faster good things happened to you as an agent.
Yeah.
Wow. So
I tried to institute something like that, and it didn't go over too well.
What do you mean?
It just, the staff was not excited to get paid in that type of fashion, but they just wanted the annual $1, $2, 5% increase and work in that direction, and we're not game for that. But I believe if you've got your skin in the game and the outcome
Right.
affects you,
I think
I think it's powerful, and I just wonder.
Absolutely.
I think it almost depends on the type of person, because I had similar experiences working in retail of all places, where I worked at Best Buy and we were no commission at all. But you go to a place like Fry's Electronics, they're very largely based on commission, and I think it totally depends on the type of person, because sometimes with a commission you get too pushy of salespeople and they're going to turn you off. But at the other side, like Best Buy, if they're not on commission, then they have no skin in the game and they don't care. They're not going to help out the customers. So how do you kind of balance that out, where you want to give people skin in the game, but you also don't want them to be too pushy to the customer?
I don't know that there's a secret sauce. One of the things is that you can a lot of companies will do is that you not only have the financial piece of it, but then you have the customer feedback piece, where customers rank their experience. And it's everybody's heard of the Malcolm Baldrige Award. It's kind of a version of that, where once the transaction is done, whether it's a phone call or a postcard or a website, where customers sort of rate their experience. And you probe on stuff like that. Was somebody too pushy? Did you get was it the right balance of help and direction? And that goes into the mix of how agents are evaluated for things like agents want to work certain shifts. I mean, everybody wants to have the weekends off. And if you have a certain score, then you would have the priority on getting the shift that you wanted. You might want to pick a team. Usually in call centers, teams are usually 12 to 14 people. You might want to be able to pick your team, because one of the things I was a big fan of is that along with individual performance, we would measure the team performance, because I wanted to have some esprit de corps where everyone would help everybody else. So if you knew that your team, if you had a high performance team, you were going to make more money, you would want to hopefully have a hand in who got selected on that team. Back to your question, if you got a good rating from customers from having that right balance, you would have a better shot of picking those people on your team. Right. So everything got it. It was always, we weren't tricky about it. It was always a reward situation. The better you did in terms of providing a good customer experience, the more good stuff that happened to you.
Well, it's interesting because it sounds like what you're really talking about is creating a way for a normal employee who may not care how the company does. They're just there to make rent.
Absolutely.
But you're creating a world where all of a sudden they begin to act the way you might in the situation as the owner of a company, let's say. Would that be fair to say?
It really is. I would start every meeting with every group of agents by asking, is anybody in the room who's not here to make money? Mm-hmm. And I would wait. And, generally after I did it once or twice, everybody would understand not to raise their hand. Because the point is, if you're here for any other reason to make money, you're in the wrong job. And if you're here because it's a nice place to visit, this isn't for you.
Right.
I want people who are motivated by money, but at the same time are smart enough to have the balance of they want to make as much as they can, but they also want to do a good job for the company.
So you're balancing that out between the incentive pay.
Correct.
And then the customer satisfaction survey that then allows for a certain level of quality of the dialogue.
Quality of life.
Quality of life.
Of work life, absolutely. Yeah. Then there's things like to your question, yes, the incentive pay and the quality of work life would be things, including you would have access to more holidays off. Mm-hmm. You would be able to, if you had a doctor's appointment, you could go switch your work day with somebody else without having to tell your manager. It was lots of things. You would be able to pick the lunch break you wanted. And it was little stuff like that really changed it from feeling like it was a job to feeling like you were your own boss. Mm-hmm. And people respond very well to that. People like to be treated independently and be treated like adults.
One of the key points that when I work with companies to help improve overall business efficiency and profitability and everything else is trying to create an environment in which the employees act like owners.
Yep.
And it sounds like it's easy for a business owner to look at their employees and say, here's how you should act. You should just act this way. The problem is that no one really is motivated to be an owner except for the owner.
Right. You've got
because they're the owner.
There's nothing in it for them.
Right. They're an employee. So by some of the things that you've recommended just within the call center environment, sounds like it's a perfect way to artificially turn an employee into an owner as far as the customer experience goes.
That's it. Go ahead.
I think another way that's kind of happening is, people have different perspectives on it, but the growing, gig economy, contract work economy, however you want to phrase it, like look at companies like Uber where you're setting your own hours, and to Glenn's point, there's not only a review rating for the driver and like the company as a whole, but now the customer. And Uber just came out saying that they're actually firing low rating customers.
I saw that this morning.
And they're banning them from the platform. So I think, you guys make an excellent point where at the end of the day, there needs to be some sort of accountability to want to do well on behalf of the company. So,
yeah, it's so funny.
We get these bonuses.
Tip your Uber driver.
Yeah.
I have a 4.95, by the way.
My wife, to your point, in the Uber situation, my wife, several weekends back, we went to Chattanooga. My son is 3 years old, so we went to the Chattanooga Choo Choo and did the whole Thomas the Day Out, Thomas the Train thing. Anyway, so we got an Airbnb, right? And so we're staying there, and we get in, we walk in, and they've got air fresheners everywhere plugged in. We're like, oh, this is disgusting. So we unplug all of them, and we put them underneath the sinks downstairs and upstairs. So when we're leaving, to me that just makes me mad. I'm like, who thinks that's okay? To like, it's like wearing a bunch of perfume in an elevator. Like, it's like, what are you doing?
It's just nasty.
What are you doing? Fish in the microwave in the break room. Like, what? Why would you do
just
that?
That's a no-go.
Burnt popcorn. Son of a.
Were you able to leave a review?
No, here's what happened. Okay, and it's only funny because it's the way my wife is an incredible person, but she's very attention to detail, and certain things are different. For what's important to me, what's important. Anyway, so okay, where we're leaving, we're kind of in a hurry. She says to me, "Don't forget to put the air fresheners back."
Where'd you store them?
I put them underneath the sinks to get them out of the way. They were stinky. And so anyway, she puts the ones upstairs out, and so I put them in before I go. But I'm the last one in, and so I end up not putting the air fresheners out downstairs. Now, mind you, I thought about it, but I thought, who wants these out anyway? That was my opinion. So I left them in underneath the thing. So we get in the car, and she said, "Did you put them out?" I said, "Well, no. Those things were gross." And she says, "But I told you to put them out. We might not get a good rating." And I go, "What?" I mean, like, what are you talking about? We're not going to get a good rating?
Did you make the bed too?
Like, I'm like, So to me, it dawns on me what you're saying is that, it's kind of like, I don't know if the whole Yelp universe and like, the Google reviews is where it's like, with service industries now and restaurants specifically live and die by their reviews. It sounds to me like they're trying to flip the script on the consumer.
Yeah, it's a two-way
Like,
street now.
It's a two-way street now. That is ugly. So anyway, we may not get another
That's fair,
Airbnb
though.
because of that.
Do you want a bad customer or bad client?
I think it's fine, but
Yeah.
it's just one of those things that I did see some the Uber stuff, and then you said that, and then all of a sudden my wife's voice in my head just dawned on me what that's all about.
I would be interested in your guys' input, speaking on like the two-way street for like reviews, like where at the end of the day, it is up to the business who they want to do business with. And there's like the classic example of bakeries turning people down based off their race or their
No
sexual
soup for you.
orientation. Like, what are your guys' take? Do you think the businesses have the right to refuse that customer for whatever reason it may be?
Well, as long as you're not, racist or gay or anything like that. I mean, like, right? I mean, who was the one business that refused to bake a cake for a gay couple getting married? Right. And I mean, like, as long as it's politically correct, I'm sure. Oh, your reviews were bad. Well, now it makes sense.
It just seems that you can be so stupid in those situations, you don't deserve to have a business.
See, and I think, I'm kind of along with you guys where at the end of the day, I would welcome, anyone's business, and if they're going to turn down that business for whatever reason because they feel a different way about their race or sexual preference, that's going to be made aware to the public, and they'll probably go out of business as a result. So, just let them turn it down and let nature take its course,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to have anything major for the normal consumer, but for, Ubers who like, I mean, I had a buddy of mine that was a Lyft driver, and some chick got in his car with a big red Slurpee, and he said, "Get out," and she raised all kinds of cane and, like, caused a big problem, called him, like, court problems.
Wow.
So it's like,
Because he didn't want the Slurpee spilling in
he
his
didn't
car?
want her, I mean, she was just some, young, mall employee who was going to literally wreck his vehicle. So, like, I mean, they got into it outside the vehicle. Anyway, it got into this whole big deal. My point is that had she been raided, and she had multiple problems historically, so it's like she easily would have been a bad rating. Well, then he could have avoided that whole situation. So to protect him or any other Uber driver who is driving around, I get it.
Yeah, that's something that Glenn and I have talked about with, developing a strategy to like kind of scale our media production services, is build out a platform similar to Uber where we're not just rated and our operator is rated, but also having a client rating. So when an operator sees a job available on the platform, they're like, all right, this person has a 1-star review, and I don't know if I want to go through the hassle, especially if it's like a real estate job where it's not going to be a whole lot of money in your pocket, but you might want to deal with that 1-star customer if it's a multi-$1,000 job, so at the end
I
of the
could
day,
see that allowing somebody to be tiered out for how they work. One
Right.
video production person or editor versus someone who is not as experienced,
right, or has lesser
could
equipment.
then choose. Hey, we've got a 2-star customer coming through. I'm not even sure who would. I mean, now you're talking about credit agencies.
Well,
It's going to be like
no, just similar
Equifax
to
is
Uber,
gonna be
right? You
doing
just
this.
have a rating system on like an app or a website.
yeah. Now you're talking global though.
I mean, you could start off locally, just have it.
It's an Equifax thing. At some, what I mean by that is that so Uber can have theirs. That's easy to control, right? Because they have enough user information. You're talking about as a video production company type of a scenario, trying to relate to some credit customer worthiness of somebody coming in outside of your sphere.
No, so
Help me understand.
they would only have a rating after they've done work with us. So say they're fresh off the boat, had a job, we have no history, therefore they would have no rating, similar to Uber. It wouldn't be until, all right, maybe they've done 8 jobs with us and have an average review of 2-star, right?
Oh,
and
eight,
then
yeah,
the
8 jobs later they have one. But
Right.
now if they go to another production company,
Right, we would
It's
have no
fresh.
idea, right?
they would not have a customer. So what I was getting at what you were saying is it almost sounds like what will evolve if this does take off. Similar to a credit agency understands your credit score, you're going to have a customer score
Right.
that would then be, it would have some global, so it would be natural for an Equifax.
It's almost like China.
Yeah, well,
having
so
that
what would
social
happen
credit
is
system.
because Equifax already has that similar infrastructure, it would be something that they would create and then allow you to then post a rating for Joe Schmo. Everyone would have some, it would be one of those silly, not silly. It's, I don't want to give Equifax any ideas, but that made when I heard you talking about it. At some point, someone has to globally control that bank.
Right. So going back into talking about Glenn's background
Yeah.
and leading to where he's at now. Now you're involved with ATDC. For those that don't know, it's the Atlanta Technology Development Center here in Atlanta. They're partnered with Georgia Tech. They work with a lot of high-tech startups, primarily startup companies. How did you get involved with ATDC?
Well, I originally started with Emory, and Emory has a program called Start Me, and it could not be any more diametrically opposed to the program that Georgia Tech has. It is primarily for neighborhood entrepreneurs who are looking to gain between $200 and $400 in operating capital to go launch their businesses. And they have 3 of these groups around. There's one at Kirkwood, one out in East Lake, and I can't remember the third one is. And they had a mentor program where, they got together once a week and brought in the entrepreneurs along with the mentors, and they took a very different approach and tried to really teach basic business, basic accounting, and then at the end, there was about 15 or 18 of the companies. One of the companies would receive maybe $1,500 in funding. And it was an interesting program, but I didn't feel like I was really providing much utility for a lot of reasons, but it was a good exposure into the way it worked. So I started to kind of just look around at what else was out there, and I kept noticing, saw a lot about Georgia Tech and ATDC, and spent a lot of time trying to get involved. It's not particularly easy because the onboarding process is not defined, and then once you do, you kind of have to make your own way. But I've been really thoroughly enjoying and fascinated by the huge disparity of interesting companies and smart people, and the fact that there is a track record of success with ATDC, and just it's like something different every day.
Yeah.
And for me, at this point in my career, I really didn't want to go back to a 9-to-5 job. I wanted to do something like this where I could take what I wanted to think was a decent amount of knowledge and apply it to other businesses that might not typically be in line for that kind of information. So it, on paper, was a great idea. It's just taken a lot of time to get through the actual implementation of how ATDC works with mentors and how it goes forward.
Yeah.
So, can you give a little bit of background of like what ATDC actually is and what they do or strive to do?
I can try from the best I know. It was formed, believe it or not, in 1980 through Georgia Tech. And the idea was that Georgia Tech, originally through the engineering department, wanted to try to find a way, and I think this is right. So if anybody hears differently and wants to correct me, please feel free to. They were trying to find a way to commercialize some of the engineering projects, and electrical, the EE projects and ME, mechanical engineering projects that they had been working on. And through that was sort of a lot of the engineering schools were doing this. And then by the 2000s, when .com was really coming on, it made even more sense for well-funded schools to try to, there were so many entrepreneurs on campus, to try to memorialize that program and have think tanks, incubators, where whether students or company, or not, either current students or recently graduated students, or even people in the community could come into this organization and receive help through the resources of the professors, through mentors, through other startups. And it's a model that's been played out several times in academia. There's also a for-profit version of this that you'll see around Atlanta, where there's companies where there's just individuals who are well-heeled will bring companies into their facilities and do exactly the same thing, all kind of hoping for the next big win. Yeah. Kind of what you read about, from Silicon Valley, and just doing it on a small scale here in Atlanta. I think Georgia Tech's mission was a little more altruistic. It wasn't a for-profit venture. It was with the goal of providing resources and expertise to help people be successful. Yeah, right. And I think that's why it's been very successful, because it has not been, out to make money per se. And
we actually met at Tech Alpharetta, where they hold a startup circle, actually ran through ATDC, but they just meet up here in Alpharetta, or up in Alpharetta. And that's when I met Glenn, and he told me about his involvement with his work in the ATDC, and it's really a great community where, like Glenn was saying, there's a lot of for-profit, like incubators and startup places around here. But between Tech Alpharetta and ATDC, Tech Alpharetta is actually partially funded by the city of Alpharetta. So they're actually really out there to help small businesses, entrepreneurs, really with a tech focus, though, just because they do still have limited resources, so they just can't help out anyone and everyone. But for anyone out there that is looking to start up a tech business or struggling to grow theirs, those are both great resources for anyone out there, because not just at Tech Alpharetta, but at ATDC. Did you ever find out how many mentors there are there?
392.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
Of that, I don't know how many are actually currently involved.
Okay.
But it's far more than are currently engaged. There's really no barrier to say you're a mentor, which I think is part of the problem.
Okay.
And that there's...
So you were saying before, you can get in, but you don't really, it's not well defined,
right.
And then you're kind of make your own way.
Right. And that I think that an organization that is as good as ATDC really deserves to have a program of mentors that are equal to what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And today, it just is not there.
Yeah, sure.
With your knowledge in marketing and working now with these new startups and helping them and mentoring them, how can you take your knowledge of having these teams of 14 or 400 in marketing, customer service, and bring that down to the startup who can't even afford,
anything,
pay their 16-year-old?
Well, the first thing I was trying to do is to at least get the mentor program where it was actually useful. And I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question specifically. The first step was to say, if there's going to be mentors, how can these startups access that expertise? So I took the last month and just went and knocked on doors at various companies at ATDC and created this cheesy research project where I asked them questions. And everybody I talked to, and I think I talked to about 35 different startup companies, told me the same thing. that they need help on specific areas and specific topics, but nobody had the same specific topic. There was a few commonalities. Everybody needed help raising money. Everybody needed help with some understanding financial modeling, accounting. Everybody wanted to know how to incorporate, things like that. But then there was a lot of questions about people didn't know how to hire. They didn't know how to use headhunters. They didn't know how to fire people. And they said, we see that there's allegedly all these mentors out there. We have no idea how to access them. And if we could get hold of some of this information, then we could potentially answer some of those questions. So what I'm pitching to the leadership is a process where we basically have created a website. Well, we've got a prototype where a startup company would do a paragraph that says, I'm looking for 2 or 3 people to help me create let's say a way to market using drone footage to go out and help sell more real estate. So I need people who happen to know real estate. I maybe need people who know photography. I need people who know accounting, and I need people who know how to structure a business. And they would put that online, and the mentors would look at it and say, okay, I'm qualified to do one of those 4. And another one say, I'm qualified to do 2 of those 4. So you'd come together with a team of 4 people. You would try to set a start time and an end time for the project, and then you would get going on the project with the company. And I think that's going to be the most effective way to do it, because otherwise this thing is just going to keep on going, and there's all this expertise that's not tapped into at all.
And are the mentors essentially a free service?
Yes. That's a great question. By definition, they're supposed to be free. Mm-hmm. One of the questions I did ask was, what's the biggest mistake a mentor could make? And I heard, when the mentor tries to turn this into a job. And it wasn't surprising. Or when the mentor comes in and has an ulterior motive, like they tell me they're going to be an investor and they're really just trying to find information. So like anything else, when you have 400 of anybody, you're going to have a few bad apples. But for the most part, it's a good group, and people are doing it for the right reasons.
It's a pay it forward system, yeah.
Exactly.
That's great.
And sorry. Maybe to answer Lynn's question more directly, from my experience working with Glenn, Glenn's came into my business and has sat down with me, very hands-on, helped me develop short-term timelines to reach milestones and goals to help, grow the revenue year over year for my business, where it's, to what Glenn was saying, there's quite a few people that I met through ATDC and the local tech and startup community who say, oh yeah, I have all this experience, I can help in this, and this area. And then when it's push come to shove to actually do any work, they want a consultant, they want a stake of your company before they even do anything. And, I don't expect anyone to work for free, but, at the end of the day, if you want to be a mentor, actually be a mentor and help. Use that experience. Don't let it sit there by the wayside waiting for the golden opportunity to come and sit on your lap.
And I think that's a great example of, we never talked about anything other than let's make the business work. And we both had an understanding that one day, if it was really successful, we'd figure something out. And we trusted each other from day one. And hopefully that day will come and we'll deal with it. But until then, we're going to just keep busting our butts trying to make it successful. Mm-hmm. And I'm perfectly comfortable. I think he is too. And we're having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And that's the best part.
Well, that goes back to your goal was to be involved with very energizing topics, businesses, ideas. You wanted to be in something that wasn't just about turning a profit. You wanted to be a part of something that was making a difference or impacting the world differently or being a disruption.
And it's exactly right. I mean, I wish I could say that, that I never had to work another day in my life because we have millions of dollars. Well, the reality is I probably need to work at least a little bit more if I'm going to live past about 62 years old. Mm-hmm. And because of that, it's easy to be altruistic. I mean, this is one of those things that I have the luxury of being able to do it right now. Mm-hmm. And as long as I can do it like this and not worry about getting paid, it's great. And I really do enjoy doing that because I never saw myself as being someone who would be, I guess, that mature. I hate to say it, but as you get older and you start to see things differently, I find that I really do enjoy doing it, and it gives me a sense of satisfaction that I did not have in my corporate life.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I was successful in my corporate life, so I have the luxury of doing this now.
Now, what is one of the barriers? I mean, we've got a lot of businesses that are listening in that are not startups, that aren't tech oriented. And I know the SBA has some opportunities very similar where they have some mentors lined up. But what would keep an established business from taking advantage of what is basically free wisdom?
Well, I think that everybody's going to have a different answer. It's probably not being able to identify what it is you need, and then and if you could, not being able to find that resource in a way that you're comfortable working with. Mm-hmm. Be my guess.
But I mean, I don't know, an established tech company that has cash flow coming in that decides that they need some additional direction on, I don't know, accounting or something. Can they just kind of come in and say, hey, we're just going to grab one of the mentors and basically get, it's like free food. Can you, if you had the means, go to the food bank and get food? You know what I'm talking about? And then go home and feed your family with it when you go about going to the store.
I don't know that you can do that with ATDC. Mm-hmm. I don't know how SBA works in that regard.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are, if you did some looking, you could find those resources. I don't know that it would truly be a free lunch, unless you just happen to know a friend. But I think that the various for-profit tech ventures are certainly not going to say, here, just take our person. And I'm guessing the SBA, I don't know, but I'm guessing they have some sort of process where you've got to sign up to be an SBA company to take advantage of what they have.
And you personally you're looking for mentor opportunities that fit within what you're looking for, which happens to be a startup, someone young, someone trying to get things going. That's exciting for you. Which is why
I'm not really age specific. I'm more the idea specific.
Yeah.
Because along with Jacob, I work with two other companies, and I always tell Jacob that my kids get mad because they're at Jacob's age. And they always tell me I like Jacob better than them. and as I point out to them, well, he's doing a lot more than you are right now, so it's true. But the other two companies I'm working with both of those guys are in their 40s. And so it's, it really runs the gamut. And it's just anybody that is sincere about wanting help and has an attitude of, I don't know everything, they don't know everything, but we'll try to figure it out together. I'm happy to help.
Yeah.
Going to answer your question, and I've taken advantage of these resources myself, and they're not tech specific. The small business development centers, they're all around the country. Typically, they're partnered with universities. So I know around Georgia, there's ones at Kennesaw, Georgia State, UGA, Georgia Tech. I know I'm missing out on a few local ones, but those are all government-funded facilities that have mentors, that have resources, training classes, seminars, all these resources to help small businesses grow in many different aspects of their business, whether it's accounting, marketing, sales. And then also another one that I was made aware of when I was in school was a program also government-funded called SCORE. And these are also mentors that sign up, and you can find a mentor pretty much just about any discipline. So when I was up in school, I looked up Part 107, which is the commercial drone license, and found actually one SCORE mentor who just happened to be in Atlanta that had a Part 107 drone license, and reached out to him, sent him an email. He gave me a call, seemed interested in meeting with me. And next time I was down in Atlanta, I went to his office, met with him, and he has a media production company down here, does government contracting. He referred me actually to Georgia Tech, where they have the GT Pack, which is another great free resource to help you get into the world of government contracting. And so there's so many resources out there that aren't tech specific. You just got to start by searching.
Yeah, that's great. You'd think there wouldn't be such a high failure rate with all these resources.
But most
Searching
people
and
don't know
asking.
about them. Yeah,
I would
asking.
say you've got to be verbal and ask.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources that are available that just aren't, they're probably underutilized or not organized enough
to know
for companies to accurately get out there and find what they need.
That's, you just brought that up, and Glenn mentioned it earlier. So many people are afraid to ask no matter what it is, but you're never going to have the answer if you don't ask, Sometimes there's a time and a place to ask that question, but if you never ask, you'll never know the answer.
Sure. Something I wanted to go back to was we were discussing about the employee culture piece of it and creating the incentives and really trying to design an employee culture where the employees step up and really treat the customers the way you might if you were the owner. You also mentioned before, maybe even before the podcast, we were chit-chatting about the cost of not treating the customer as the owner might. Can you kind of relate that back to your work when you were dealing with call centers? I think that you even had like a monetary value of some level.
Well, are you talking about if you have an experience where you talk to an agent that, say, is in a third world country or something different?
I guess from the call center perspective, you run into that specifically. But I mean, think about like any service company when they've got someone answering the phone, even a Sheldon. You know, like if someone calls in to Kingsworth Spencer and were to get a Judy, which Judy is uniquely designed she is the bulldog behind, with the IRS. She is the one that has a very direct, role to help making sure everything is kept in order and in line. And so she is, everyone has their own personality types, right? And everyone's different. But having someone like a Sheldon on the front, lines really creates this atmosphere of warmth and I don't know how else you would describe it because I haven't, I've only met him in passing and it's never been in the same capacity as a normal customer. But something along those lines.
Well, he was handpicked for his warmth. And guess what? He wants to be in the medical care facility. He wants to be a nurse. So there you go again, talking about healthcare.
So I guess that what I'm asking is that in framing it in that way, not just the call center, but recognizing that any small business, when they want to really achieve a certain level of ease, because I mean, when I work with companies, there's this what's called no man's land between $1 million and $5 million in top line revenue. And it's this period where the owner has to start hiring and bringing in good people to help grow the business to the next level. Well, it becomes a big challenge when they don't have the mindset of creating the employee culture around to support the right kind of environment, right? So I think what we started to touch on, and while it may have been specific to the call center, was even a way to create that an artificial version of it, because it's almost it's asinine to think that a normal employee would take on an owner mindset, right? Unless they have some incentivization around those behaviors. I mean, you have people who are genuinely out there to excel in that arena, but
they're definitely out there.
They're out there, but they're fewer and far between. And even those people do even better when it's incentivized, right? They feel more rewarded. They feel better about themselves. They're getting they can take lunch when they want. You know what I'm saying? They can switch their schedule around. Those kind of things. I just want to review that in this context, because to me, if we could impart one thing today, it's how important it is to level up your employee culture to exude the things that you touched on.
I'm not sure if this is going to address exactly what you're asking, but I'll mention one thing that is becoming more and more popular is that if you look at your entire workforce, you're not going to have 100% superstars. And I think y'all were just talking about some of these people. Some of them are very, very good at being on the front lines, and some of them are very, very good at doing stuff that we're not necessarily talking to customers. In its purest form, most people are motivated by money. I mean, it's the way we keep score. And there's certainly, along with money, there's the recognition that you can't undervalue. And between the two of those things, that's what people kind of get and it kind of completes that, I guess, their ego and their super ego or whatever all that stuff is. But they've got to have, just the money alone won't do it. There has to be the understanding that they're doing a good job, and they have to be recognized from their peers that they are something different than the status quo. And that one of the things that I found is that a way to do that along with the money is that probably one of the most effective ways is that if you have employees that are customer facing, that to be able to route certain customers to certain employees is hugely effective and hugely satisfying to the employees, because they know it's being done because they are, in effect, superstars, and that they're the ones that can handle the toughest situations. And there's a theory that says you can create a caste system where only your best customers go to your best employees, and your best employees will continue to excel while your mediocre employees won't. But the reality is that mediocre employees or mid-level employees who see other employees that are doing better and receiving more recognition, I've always found they're going to strive harder because they want that recognition. The money's only part of it. I mean, it's a big part of it, but they want to know that they're seen as being better than somebody else.
Being
That's human
appreciated.
nature.
We all want to have purpose, right?
Absolutely.
And this is all part of that purpose-driven life.
Absolutely.
That we innately have this desire for.
And just showing up every day at work and to getting a check is not enough.
Yeah.
So by doing that, we really discovered that over the course of time, we got a pretty good profile of which of our employees were going to do best with which of our customers. And it became very well known that tough customers went to certain employees, and other employees wanted to have that swagger to say, I can take on anybody. I can fly anything. And that really made a huge difference with people. And it gets back to exactly what you said. And it sounds so simple, but you got to look, what motivates all of us.
Right.
And to add on top of that, we talked with Thomas Woodruff about, especially with the younger workforce coming in, they're really driven by having that purpose and feeling like they're adding onto a team, that they're working together to accomplish something that they wouldn't be able to do just working by themselves.
Sure.
And that's something Glenn and I have talked about in bringing on new editors to our team, and just trying to put people where they want to be, not try to pigeonhole them into some area that they could do that job,
right,
but that's not what they want to do, and then no one's going to be happy as a result because they might cut corners, or it might take them longer to do that job that someone else that actually wants to do it could do it much quicker, be happier about it,
right,
and maybe even take less pay for it.
How are you going about, and I know we probably need to wrap up here pretty soon, but how would you go about uncovering that? Like, there's personality tests, there's like strength finders, like
asking questions.
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
you can't
communication.
Have just take
Who would have
this test.
thought? Yeah.
I agree. There has been so much research and data on personality testing lately that I've really I think it's come full circle, that personality tests have become almost like a throwback to the 60s, where when you have nothing else to use, you try to default to a personality test. But if you're a good manager and you know your business, I think it's incumbent on you as a manager to try to be able to make those evaluations and determine that using your gut, because it's going to be your responsibility. And that if you can't make that kind of commitment to people and knowing what you think it's going to take to be successful, then you probably shouldn't be in a position in charge. And I always get nervous. I mean, I know all the times early in my career when I get tested for various things and told I should be in a cage someplace, I didn't think that was a very good assessment, but it was always easy to game the system on those tests. Once you understood them, you could make it think anything you wanted to.
Right.
And your smart employees are going to do that, and that's not going to work for them anyways. And your mediocre or your inferior employees are going to, they're going to show up as being mediocre and inferior because they can't figure out the test. So you want to be able to use your gut, and I think that's a key part of management, is following your gut and knowing what you need.
And one other thing that I would like to add on to that, especially in the customer-facing perspective, is just knowing who you're working with someone like a Judy or one of my business partners. I would not want him to have my job, like doing all the communication, because he's very task-based, like, hey, do this, and he'll do it better than anyone else.
Exactly.
But if we were to switch roles, our company would be on fire right now.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's
Fire
just
in a bad way.
Yeah.
yeah. So it's just having an understanding of who you're working with and not trying to make them someone they're not. And that all starts by asking them questions. What do you want out of this? What do you want to do on a day-to-day basis? Or, when do you want off? And just see what's important to them.
I was going to mention one other thing, that I'm a big fan of test drives with new employees.
Oh, yeah.
And I volunteer to do it when I'm going to be engaged, or when I'm hiring somebody. I'll ask them if they're willing to spend a couple of days with me in the company, and just to see what we do and to see how they operate. And I'll do the same thing to say, I'd like to spend a couple of days with you. Let them, really be involved for 2 or 3 full days and see everything that's going on, because you know, in an hour-long interview or 2-hour interview, you can pretty much bluff your way or make your way through anything.
Mm-hmm.
But over a couple of days, you're going to really start to understand how people operate. And you're getting a much better feeling whether somebody's going to be a good fit or not. And if I'm making a key decision, I don't want to make a mistake. I want that person to know what they're getting into, because one of the questions I always ask in an interview is, if you take this job and 60 days down the road, you go home and tell your wife, your husband, your significant other, I've made the biggest mistake of my life, what is it you would have found out? And a lot of times people will say that the job that I thought I was getting into wasn't the job I was getting into.
Yeah.
And if I hear that enough, I figure, let me go see how I can minimize that by getting people to really understand what it is we do, how I operate as a manager, how I'm expecting them to operate, but most importantly, how the team operates.
Oh, that's a great point, man. You know, I think it's like to hire a bad employee and have to fire them and find out it's like a $20,000.
It's expensive.
Or like it's like half their salary. I mean, it's some level of like silliness as far as what it costs to make a mistake.
And it's also really detrimental to the employee.
It's a morale, you know, it hurts morale, everything else. Okay, so maybe just, because what you just said was a great idea, but I think even myself, when I hear you say, oh, a test drive, couple of days, hanging out with this person, what does that really look like?
Go ahead.
Just in the context of how we've
The
put that into use.
millennial raised his hand.
Yeah. But yeah, we brought on a couple interns to help us with our editing, and we had an interview meeting with each of them and just saw what they wanted to do, their interest level. But at the end of the day, we didn't know if they were going to be a good fit until they had a couple of days to sit down on the computer and start editing, and made sure it was a good fit for both of us. And then, you know, lo and behold, for whatever reason, they liked working with us and we like working with them. So, you know, it's just giving them hands-on work, not trying to give them, you know, an easy test or whatever. This is what you will be doing on a day-to-day basis, and you know, it changes from project to project, but just let them see what a real day is going to be like.
Well, I guess and that makes sense. So they came in and it was 2, 3, 4 hours. I mean, I'm thinking like that, for someone to really say, okay, what does a 2-day commitment look like? That's a great idea. They came in and they actually worked on a product for you.
10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
I've taken people on trips. I mean, when
Okay.
I've had a group trip to go to see a call center, I've had somebody, you know, fly with me and somebody else, and you know, let them be as involved just like they were already on full time, and then be part of the decision making and their observations, and really, you know, it's almost like their first day of work.
So you're engaging with them, asking them, what do you think
Absolutely.
about this? What did you see here?
Now,
What'd you
granted,
pick up
by the
on?
time I get to that point, I'm pretty close to pulling the trigger and hiring them.
Okay, you're not just like, hey, first
No, this
day
is not on the
interview.
first
All right.
date.
This is like, yeah,
We're down the road. And they understand that.
Okay.
But I'm not paying them, and you know, I'm covering their expenses. But it's just, especially on somebody who's kind of expensive, it certainly is a much safer way to proceed for everybody involved.
Yeah,
And if
I like
somebody, a lot of times I do it because an employee may be on the fence about me, and I want them to, you know, make the right decision.
that makes sense.
Well, I don't know how much I can talk about it since it's not me, but my dad went through something similar where he was working full-time at a company as the CTO, and he was working on the side doing some contract work, developing some back-end applications for this other company, really respected the guy, and eventually through working on a contract basis with him, the owner of that company asked my dad to come on, and then ended up in a position that actually didn't fit best for him because they tried to pigeonhole him into something that they needed and not something to really optimize my dad's, you know, core competencies.
Right.
And that happened because they didn't have a test drive. As much as they've worked together in the past on other projects, it wasn't what his actual
Right.
role in the company was going to be. So I think that's a phenomenal idea.
Yeah, that's great. Lynn, what about you? What do you think about
I'm
a test
sensing
drive?
some dating advice here.
Oh.
No, I do like the test drive, and I think the intern program, we've talked about instituting an intern program before investing too much into somebody. See what they're like, see what we want them to see, what we're like, and if it's a good fit. And we have went to Kennesaw State and Georgia State. We're still in the infancy state, but definitely see some value into an internship program and bringing on the people that will fit into our culture, because there are many great people out there who won't fit into our culture.
Right. So you may even be hiring out of the intern program.
Right. And there may be some, great people that present well, that once you get them in, it's like,
Well, the intern program, you're definitely going to get a chance to get to know. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's a great test drive idea. So, yeah, and pretty much anybody can have interns.
Yeah.
But they tend to be obviously in school, and so you're dealing with somebody who doesn't have any real experience, potentially, unless, of course, they've gone back to some level.
Yeah, but one thing that we like to ask our guest is if you have a takeaway from something we mentioned in this podcast or something throughout your career as one piece of advice that you would give to a startup company, a small business owner, someone looking to get down their own path of operating their own business, what would that be?
Probably, and I guess it's really a life lesson overall, is that it's never too late. That just because you may be at the end of one part of your career, it gives you the opportunity or the luxury to go do something else. And there's absolutely nothing that stops you other than the fear of the unknown. And this should be a time, where you really go take some chances and have fun.
That's kind of funny. I've been listening to a song, and one of the lyrics is "Beginnings often hide themselves in ends."
Maybe that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point right there for sure. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for being here. We do this because as business owners, we tend to suffer silently. So to have these conversations where we get a chance to brainstorm ideas, come up with other great directions, like hopefully you listening have picked up on something that will be meaningful to you. But thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us. If somebody is at the stage where maybe they've had their own bookkeeper, or maybe they've been frustrated with their bookkeeper, or they're at the stage of leveling up, I suggest that they talk to you about doing some tax planning, doing it on a regular basis, doing it ahead of tax season. And now is a good time for them to establish that relationship. How can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can call me at 770-552-8286. Just ask to speak to me, and I can walk you through, leveling up, or, if you're in the beginning stages of business and you're wondering, I hear people are incorporated or S corps or whatnot. We know all about that, and when it's advisable to change up and level up, and even level down in situations. But be more than happy to talk. And I have a bit of an altruistic nature to myself, so like I said, I'm happy to talk to you.
That's great. Jacob, we obviously they're watching your product right now, and if somebody is out there and is looking to use video, and whether or not it's using the technology of the drones to do some of the awesome things that you're involved with, or if it's as simple as just doing a kick-ass corporate video with some about us videos to showcase the employees and to even foster that employee culture that we've been talking about today, how can they get a hold of you?
They can go to our website, iview.media, or they can reach out to me directly by email, jacob.andrews@iview.media, or by calling us at 678-249-0579.
Thank you. And Glenn, man, we are so excited and glad that you were here today. I mean, I know that I talk and I think a lot about that employee culture piece, and to hear how you go about creating that within just the call center context really opened my mind up even a little bit better. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Now, if there's a business out there that has a call center and is struggling to try to figure out, literally, like some of the things we're talking about, they're just not connecting the dots with why things aren't going the right way, their retention isn't right, how can they get a hold of you?
Probably the easiest way, my phone number is 404-423-1000. That's probably, my email address is Glenn, Glenn, .wasser, WASSER, @gmail.
Okay, great. Not bellsouth.net, right?
No, don't use my MindSpring anymore.
And again, so I'm Corbin Cook with SMB Strategy Consultants on Auxilium Associates, and I focus on helping businesses become more profitable, really managing that sustainable growth that they're looking for. So often we find that the numbers aren't right, and without good numbers, you can't forecast. Without forecasting, you fly blind. And if you're in that no man's land zone of 500,000 to 5 million in top line revenue, you're probably struggling to figure out how you're going to cross that valley. Give me a call. I'd love to have a chit chat and just do a strategy session with you. You can reach me at 404-783-3305 or Corbin at smb-sc.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Y'all have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.